Nathan,
Read.
dude, isn't this crazy? Isn't this
Respect! Read! It happened! Holy cow!
I can't
What in
believe
the
this.
world, dude?
I can't believe this.
Anyone who's confused at all, the episode you're about to listen to was recorded before the Oscars. This little tag is recorded after the Oscars. We almost did it the night of, but time delays and families to bed and all that whatnot. So it is the day before you're listening to this, the day after the Oscars. And yes, shocking me personally, who I had said with a heavy heart, not that 1917 is bad. It's just not the best film of the year. I had said with a heavy heart based on the awards leanings that Sam Mendes and 1917 was going to win director and picture. And lo and behold, goodness gracious, there is still right left to be found in the world, Reed.
Oh man, it's amazing. And you know what's crazy?
Yeah.
And what's crazy is it was the shoe-in to win international film, which, by the way, great.
Sure.
I do like the pivot on that category. I think that's nice. They renamed the category, but so it won Best International Film, which it was a shoe-in for. I had strong suspicion it would win Original Screenplay. Tarantino had gained some traction there, but I suspected that it would win Original Screenplay. And the Oscars have been known for a highly acclaimed film to give diverse directors the award. So I thought maybe Bong Joon-Ho would win directing. Never, ever imagined that Parasite would go ahead and take home the Best Picture award.
It made history last night.
It
made
did.
history. It won international film, it won screenplay, it won director, it won picture. Like, you had even alerted me when you and I off pod would text back and forth about its odds, and I just admitted heavy-heartedness that it wasn't going to win for sure. And you had sort of backed that up with some data, like no foreign language film, no non-English film had ever won Best Picture. And so I had just written it off. I was like, this is not going to happen. And dude, I have not, the last time I exclaimed with that level of intensity and volume was when Steve Rogers picked up Thor's hammer and beat the tar out of Thanos last year. Like, awesome. I don't get that enough, and I need it more. So it was a thrilling experience.
So a couple things, and then listeners get to enjoy the episode that we recorded, which is a good one, and I think you'll really enjoy it, listeners. But one bit of trivia that I discovered after the fact. Not only has Parasite made history of being the only foreign language film to win Best Picture, but Bong Joon-ho is in a very limited category of only two other filmmakers. He has won the Best Picture, the Best Director, and the Best Original Screenplay for the same film, and only two other directors in Oscar history have ever done that. Alejandro Iñárritu did it for Birdman, and Billy Wilder did it for The Apartment. But in Oscar history, that acclaim as well, he is in a rare category, though not exclusively as unique as Parasite winning Best Picture. Still, he's got to be a happy man.
It was so amazing to see you, like. Again, it feels like we're detracting 1917. That's not the intention, but you could tell that room was energized by Parasite doing what they did.
Oh,
and that
absolutely.
was really exciting to see that level of support. And he delivered an amazing speech as director, significantly calling out Scorsese. That was lovely. Calling out Tarantino for his support over the years. That was lovely. I mean, it was just a really great thing, and we need more great things.
It's so true. Yeah, speaking of speeches, and then we can let everybody get to the episode, but speaking of speeches, man, so yes, Bong Joon-ho's director's speech is worth your Googling, YouTubing, whatever. He showers the audience with some class, which is amazing. But also, Joaquin Phoenix, congratulations to him for his Best Actor win for Joker. That was far more predictable than Parasite winning Best Picture, but still, Joaquin Phoenix delivered a very affecting, very humble
wonderful speech.
It was a wonderful, wonderful speech, just laced with the complexity of emotions that the man must be feeling as he reflects on his life and his current status in light of things that are going on, and it was really wonderful. So definitely,
lest we forget, if you just want to also watch a speech, like a person start talking and then 5 minutes later stop talking.
Oh my
You
goodness.
can watch Renee Zellweger's.
I felt so bad for her because
Woo-wee.
having to follow Joaquin
Yes.
Phoenix's speech,
Yes.
she was, and so here's what's funny. Listeners can't get through an episode without this. So I have met Renee Zellweger.
Oh my God, Reed.
Yes, no, it's true.
I can't get through a day without this.
Well, it's true. Hey, you brought it up. I was just gonna talk
No,
about Bong
I
Joon-Ho
didn't bring up you
and
meeting
Joaquin
people.
Phoenix.
I just brought up a speech.
I will say that Renee Zellweger is near the tippy top of celebrities in terms of just like when she was approached by customers in the store, she would stop what she was doing. She would set her items down. She would turn and give them her full attention, and she did that every single time, and there were a decent handful of disruptions. She was very kind and generous to her fans, so she's clearly a very open-hearted and generous person, but boy, her speech, I do not know if it was just the intimidation of what Joaquin Phoenix had done, but I did feel very bad for her because she was struggling so hard to communicate something effective and empowering and impactful, and it was not entirely what she wanted it to
coherent
be, I don't believe.
I mean, the second he finished, I thought she needs to either just keep it super short or have something amazing. And she did not do either of those things.
Unfortunately, not either of them. Yes, listeners, we wanted to tag in very quickly just to say congratulations to Bong Joon-Ho and the entire creative team of Parasite. Congratulations to Joaquin Phoenix. And you'll hear in the episode, we have a lot of praise to heap upon Parasite. Hopefully you've seen it. Don't let the subtitles put you off. We detail why in the episode, but by all means, go check it out.
What a wild thing to be able to say Parasite is literally the #1 movie on the planet. That is
absolutely
an actual thing you can say with total veracity and data to back it up. And enough of
amazing.
our prattling. Shall we read? Get on to the episode.
All right, guys. We'll see you later. Bye.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
There's nothing to fear except God. Whatever that means to you.
Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks? Why do I say this? Because we got Holy Ghost.
You're listening to a podcast exploring faith and fear, what scares us and what saves us. This is The Fear of God.
Hello, and welcome back to the Fear of God podcast. It is week 2 at our look of some of your listener-voted top 10 horror films of 2019. Last week, we discussed Joker. This week, we'll be discussing Bong Joon-Ho's 6-time Oscar-nominated film, including Best Picture and Director, Parasite. In fact, by the time this airs, we will know if it won any of what it's nominated for. Speaking to you right now is one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse, and typically with me is fellow co-host Reed Lackey, but y'all, he was here a second ago. He had this strange rock in his hand and insisted on calling himself Kevin, declared it all metaphorical, and then just kind of wandered off. I'm sure he's fine. I'm sure he's fine. He'll be back. He always comes back. Here at The Fear of God, we explore the holy and the horrific at the intersection of faith and fear, dissecting what scares us in order to find what saves us. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, come find us on Twitter, on Instagram, or join us in the Facebook group for lively discussions around horror and genre-themed media, books, and film. At The Fear of God, we explore. We don't explain, except for right now, when I'm going to explain that you can listen to the Fear of God podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, CastBox, etc., as Kevin Crumb, star of Reed's favorite movie, loves to say. Do you know where we're not featured? Because we don't. Tell us, and we'll look into it. Let us know over at our fancy new website, thefearofgodpodcast.com. And while you're at it, subscribe to us on your favorite platform and also leave us a 5-star rating and or glowing review. Special shout out to Fogger Steve Beckley, who has just recently dusted off the old Fear of God Letterboxd page. gotten it up to date with tons of lists and an episode guide, our Letterboxd, starting this month with last week's Joker, will be updated from here on out with notes reflecting mine and Reed's comments from our recommend section of the show, including translating the fog meter ranking over to Letterboxd's ranking system. It is one more fun way to find and engage with what we're doing here on The Fear of God. Speaking of the fun, don't forget that at thefearofgodpodcast.com, you can head over there right now and learn all about our brand new umbrella series for the year called 2020-2020. Additionally, you will see plenty of lovely art provided exclusively for this podcast by the one and only illustrator Jacob Hunt. Thank you to Jacob for his guest appearance last week. Do yourself a favor. Go to the website, click on the merch button to make a merch perch. Find art from the Fear of God on t-shirts and mugs and cell phone cases and pillows. And Reed! Or Kevin, you're back.
Sorry, I
Reed.
had left
Yeah.
something down in the basement. I forgot all about it. So,
it happens. Reed,
it did.
You, my running mate this election year, I don't know if you heard, the Iowa caucuses just happened, and though it took some time, we won.
We did? We did?
We won the Iowa caucus. We're out in the
Man.
lead. We're just,
I didn't
gonna
even
take it all.
go. It's so great.
Well, hey,
like,
you know,
we're so
it's just-
popular.
the people have spoken. The people have
They
spoken.
have. They have.
All, however
Oh.
many of, all 87 of them that are subscribed on CastBox spoke loud and clear.
87 is going to become this, eerily significant
number.
number.
Yeah. It's like 19 last
Oh,
year.
my gosh.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, man? It's good to be here. And yeah, how are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm feeling a little intimidated by
the conversation?
by the Parasite. Yeah.
So-
before we get there, Reed,
before we get there.
I mentioned this a second ago.
Okay.
But I was wondering if, because you're Lackey the list man, right? You love a list.
I do love a list.
You love a data point.
I love my list.
You you love, like, just, I don't know, like, how would you describe it? You love details. You love organization.
I love
elements.
it helps me to structure my thoughts, to rank things. What is my favorite? What is my fourth favorite? What is my 17th favorite of a thing? It helps structure my world for me to rank things.
You know, if I had just made a list, if you will, over the last 20 years of every time we're in the middle of a random conversation about, some subgenre of a subgenre type of movie, book, or TV show, and
Right.
you chime in with, that is actually my 16th and a half favorite thing of that particular genre, subgenre
gosh.
ever. And I'm just like, dadgum, Reed, like, why? Yes.
You've
the level of
categorized it all.
specificity. You do. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't
No,
know.
it is true.
I don't kind of want to know how I rank in terms of your listings, but
You probably don't. Like that was
what
was
you
not the
don't
joke I
know
was
is I'm
expecting.
feeling genuinely intimidated about this conversation, and your little ping just there is like,
Oh, wait a minute.
deflation.
I don't
I feel like I just had a rock collide with my brain while I'm on the
smash
ground.
you.
You know, You just, like,
Respect!
took your- Oh, wow. Yes, that was good. That is number at least 2 on my list of favorite things that have happened so far in this conversation. At least.
At least number
So,
2.
I'm
At
going to
least.
keep a running list. Now, however, will you let those who are fans of lists, and even those who might not totally be fans of lists, but still
Okay.
are fans of us and want to help us out, let them know what they can do to get involved with 2020-2020.
Okay, yes, this is the year of lists, if you will. Okay, so we're coming right up on it. We will be officially launching this next phase of the series, and perhaps the first official phase of the series, in March. So we need your participation. Our year-long umbrella series is 2020-2020. And what that will mean is we are looking at your 10 favorite horror films from every year starting in 2000. But to know what your favorite horror films are, we need you to vote. We need you to go to thefearofgodpodcast.com. We need you to click on the banner that takes you to those surveys. We need you to click on the links, and you will be able to select as many films as you want that are your favorites from that specific year. Last week, I made a really big pitch specifically for the year 2000, but as of this recording, the years 2000 through 2005 are live on the website. You can take any or all of those surveys. We urgently need you to go and particularly vote for 2000, 2001, and 2002. But you will have access to all 6 of those surveys and be able to cast your vote. I'm telling you, we're seeing some of the results come in. It is an interesting picture of, there are some films that are favorites of mine that are ranking lower than I expected. Some films that I find very interesting are getting as much affection as they are. So if you want your voice heard for 2020, then I want you to go to the website, click on it, vote on the website for those years. We will be, throughout the year, closing down certain surveys and opening up new years. So time is of the essence. So as early as you possibly can, go to the website, cast your votes, and we will be submitting those ranked lists starting in March. I'm extremely excited for this series. I'm really anxious to see how everything finally plays out. We're going to finally get to some films that we've talked about in one degree or another over the years, just depending on how listeners rank them. So this is fun. I'm having a blast checking the surveys.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Even just you have thus far, because you're I was trying to think of a fun nickname for you in the moment, and it just wasn't coming.
Oh, okay.
You're our list guy. You were sending me kind of where things are currently standing on the currently open polls, and even just seeing that list, a couple of them I had not seen, which is always nice. And the ones I had seen, though, I'm very fond of, and
it's exciting.
Like you just established, we're always looking for inroads to be able to discuss some of this stuff without just drawing things out of a hat. Speaking of drawing things out of a hat, that's not really a good segue. I don't know why I said it, but I mean, it's actually a decent segue, but not for where I'm going here. Dude, I know, you've seen the work that old continuity guru Steve Beckley has done on Letterboxd. Isn't that great?
Incredible. No, it's incredible. Y'all, if you have not checked out our Letterboxd page, which is publicly available to you, it is absolutely incredible. You deserve, you owe it to yourself to go and check out how much of our conversations are now visible for your summary review. It's amazing. It's really amazing.
Especially if you're a list guy like Readin, and clearly Steve.
I tell Steve, I want you to know I am actually ranking your updates and your selections of quotes. So yeah, it's just
this is like
it's
wheels
meta
within wheels. It's like a Russian nesting doll of list making.
Let's rank our favorite lists to make.
Let's rank the rankings.
Let's do it.
Oh my gosh!
At the bottom, number 8 would be groceries. Number 7 would be chores.
Survey says.
Oh my god!
It's like Church's Chicken. Did you see that?
I did.
The Family Feud thing out of Canada.
Actually, no.
Oh,
I don't think I know what you're talking
really
about.
Funny. Yeah, it's.
I thought you were talking about the old Ricky Smiley routine, but
no,
that wasn't that one.
It was a Canadian Family Feud, and of all the stupid things to bring up, you're talking about lists made me think of this, and it was like the final whatever on Family Feud, and the question was like, what is Popeye's favorite food? And the girl
saw this.
Yes,
and she said chicken.
She got over eager. Well, she said chicken because she was thinking Popeye's chicken. Yeah, not Church's, but Popeye's chicken. And then she starts dancing like,
she is so proud. She's so proud of having got it
hysterical.
first. Oh man, that is great.
If listeners get nothing else from this conversation, they should go Google that if they haven't seen it.
I'm not
gonna watch that foreign language film, but I kind of like Nathan and Reed, so I'll give the first 20 minutes a listen.
And well, then go check out that. And you know what else you should check out? What you watching? What you reading? What you listening to?
It's been too long. It's been too long. I would, on your usage, what's the word I'm looking for, man? I'm telling you, my brain is so scattered right now.
Oh, okay.
On the times when Reed has sung What You Watchin', I
Mm.
would rank what you just did.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know that it would be a super high ranking.
I don't
It was
like
okay.
this game when you do it. I don't. This is not my favorite thing. On this thing.
I'm gonna rank this experience pretty low.
This is pretty low. This is pretty low on my list of 112 things that have happened. This is at the bottom. Like, I'm just saying. And I had a hangnail earlier that tops this. It's
Okay, so you asked me what I was watching, or reading or listening to.
one of those things.
So two things. We just finished January, and I actually read about 4 books in January. Read.
That's
and-
impressive. I only read 3.
Thank you. In the ranking of how many books each of us has read,
You win.
Yeah.
What's your page count? I'm teasing. I'm totally teasing.
That I don't know. so many pages. So I do worry a little bit that like this year is going to be like the year of the ugly cry for me, because the two I'm going to cite here have both kept my heart soft, which is never a bad thing.
Sure,
But one of the books I read, actually my wife gifted me back in October, and just kind of got around to it finally in January. And the title of the book is Tattoos on the Heart, and it's written by a gentleman named Gregory Boyle. And as far as some of the stuff I read, sometimes this is actually a very accessible book. I would encourage anyone who likes the things we talk about would find this an easy read. Much like
I'm not going to say that I'm that. No,
you're-
I'm not.
You're an easy
I'm not that. I'm not. Stop. Move on. I'm not. I knew where you were going, and I'm like, no.
I know
no.
you did. Of all the times I've ever appropriated the word READ and applied it to your name, that one would rank kind of low.
Kind of. Oh my gosh. These.
Okay, so
I never thought I'd say this, but you're putting me off of lists. I mean, this is.
I'm what?
You're putting me off of lists. Like I am.
Oh.
My appreciation for lists
Somebody
is
had to.
depreciating in real time. Wow.
Somebody had to. So Tattoos on the Heart by Gregory Boyle. Gregory Boyle is a Jesuit priest who started an organization in Southern California called Homeboy Industries. And Homeboy Industries is a nonprofit that rehabilitates is maybe the wrong word, but Boyle's whole mission in life that he's adopted through this specific organization is to live amongst the most densely populated gang geography in the country. And so Homeboy Industries is an organization that he started to employ.
Yeah.
And through employment, grant dignity to these young men and women who carry around with them the deep scars of growing up in the environment in which they have. And like I jokingly said, it's a pretty brisk read. It's a pretty easy and straightforward and accessible, but what it also is very powerful and very arresting. And the ways he lays out his sort of operating system from a faith perspective will challenge a lot of people.
Wow.
His point is not, I'm here to serve or to pull someone out of. His operating system is, I'm here to be present with. And that's kind of the end of the sentence. And it's he has this whole middle section in the book on success and just attacking what capitalist meritocracy America would call success, and how success by kingdom standards is not what it looks like as we typically define it. Anyway, It's a very powerful book. I would encourage anyone to pick it up. Pretty brisk, not hard, but will batter your heart into submission at just how, kind of beautiful, true transformation can be. So there's that. And then I had the opportunity, it kind of fell in my lap, Thank you. Shout out to podcast listener Matt Wiggins, who reached out about a month ago or so and was just like, hey, did you know Brian Stevenson is coming to Charlotte? And I was like,
oh, boy.
Actually, I did not. So Matt alerted me to and helped facilitate the means by which I acquired a couple of tickets to
awesome.
go listen to Brian Stevenson.
Wow.
And even though much of what he has to say in those settings is stuff I'm familiar with and have heard, it is no less powerful and potent and prophetic. And you just kind of listen to someone. I think you'll know what I mean when I say this. You know, there are faith speakers, right? There are people you could go and listen to them and get inspired. Inspirational speakers is the idea I'm looking for there. There are those people, and maybe you get something, maybe of value out of that, like something to take away, and like, but it's very ethereal. It's very spiritually abstract. And then you have people like Stevenson who are doing and living the hard work that is required for true. He might in private refer to it as kind of kingdom work. That's not the type of language he utilizes in public settings, but that's definitively what it is. And so you watch someone exercising those sorts of skills and gifts and using their very life in the way in which he does, and it is challenging, it is moving, it is inspiring, it is encouraging. Anyway, so those would be my whatchas for this particular conversation read. What are you watching, reading, listening to, doing?
Mine are so much more trivial than
those. That's okay. It's okay, man.
Okay, so I have,
I was just virtue signaling.
Wow.
I'm just kidding, actually. As you know, I hate that phrase.
I do know. That's why I was surprised you used it. Okay, so for me, so the January in terms of my entertainment, and it's funny because we haven't talked about this in several weeks. So there's a lot of things I could catch up on. I'm going to hit 3 just in real quick passing. So the first, because it doesn't tie into itself, is I caught on Apple TV Plus a show much talked about called The Morning Show. Have you heard of The Morning Show? Do you know anything about it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've not watched it, but I definitely know of it and about it. And the promo pops up every time you turn on your Apple TV. It does.
So high-profile cast, obviously. It's got Jennifer Aniston, Reese Witherspoon, Steve Carell. There's a couple of other noteworty names, particular to
Mr. Mark Duplass.
I was just about to say him, but you could just say him.
I feel bad.
No,
I'm sorry.
You don't feel that bad, but that's. I mean, you just,
I do because I didn't know that you were going to say that.
What I was about to say, which it sincerely is fine, is just was particular interest to Fear of God listeners because the star of Creep and Creep 2 is in it in a pretty major role. So Billy Crudup's also in it. I'm not going to name any more of the cast, but just basically what I found interesting about the show. So the show, I feel, is exceptionally well crafted and written. There are a couple of episodes here and there that I would say no more than maybe 2 or so that lull a little bit where you're like, okay, get on with it. But the show is, the effect on me was pretty powerful. The show, in brief, deals directly with the many, many facets of the effect of the Me Too movement in the workplace. So that is you would know this about 10 minutes into the show, but that is what the entire show is about. It obviously lots of different things happen, but it is dealing with the different degrees and the different victims and the different scenarios in which that have become part of this Me Too conversation. And one of the things I vastly appreciated about the show, I would highly recommend the show. I would strongly recommend it. But one of the things I really appreciated about it is I feel like there was a large degree of intention to create a lot of different scenarios. Like it feels like almost perhaps one could ding it for being like too deliberate with okay, you've got every single scenario. Okay, you have the completely consensual and non-coercive workplace relationship. You've got the mega celebrity accused, facing a bunch of accusations and thus immediately fired. You have the people who may or may not have known about that person's doings, the people who may or may not have participated in those doings, either willingly or been victims of it. And so you have like all of these different things that play together and play off of each other in the larger story. But I found the overall effect to be really compelling, and I highly, highly recommend it. It has been renewed for a season 2, but I would strongly recommend, if you have access to Apple TV Plus, The Morning Show starring Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Aniston and Steve Carell. Extremely mature content, probably with what I just described. That would go without saying, but extremely mature content. But it's very good.
Does Morning show his dupless?
He does not, but.
Oh.
But the way
the look on your face,
the way that you no, actually they don't. But the way you just said that just took it took me by surprise. I was like, no, he does not. He does not do that. So, but no. So the next thing that you mentioned, you've read about 4 books this month. That's great. That I've read only 3 in the past month. But I receive every year for Christmas, because the man is just insanely prolific. I receive a new Stephen King book. It's been a tradition that if a new Stephen King book comes out anywhere in the late August to early October timeframe, or any time thereafter, I receive that book as one of my mainstay Christmas presents. So I got Stephen King's new book, The Institute, which I read and I enjoyed. But it prompted, this time around, it just sort of prompted this big, there's a lot of these books that I haven't read in a very long time, and would love to sort of connect with. And so I reread Bazaar of Bad Dreams, which is his collection of short stories, I think his most recent collection of short stories. And then I reread The Outsider, which I loved, and that I've even mentioned it on the show before, the first time that I read it through. But the reason that so I've been reading Stephen King material. That is that. But that segues into the is it HBO? It's HBO, yeah. The TV series The Outsider, which we've referenced only in passing so far, but which I'm watching and I know you're watching, and I'm only about halfway through it. I'm only 5 episodes in.
Yeah.
That's all that's aired. But I love it. I absolutely love the show. I think it's.
It's super strong. Now, I am unfamiliar. I have not read the book, so you know the story was new to me. But I don't know. I don't know much of Richard Price's work outside of The Outsider, but also he wrote The Night Of, which was also an HBO miniseries from about 2 years ago or so. But it almost seems this perfect marriage between King's trend towards the fantastic and Price's gritty procedural but real kind of vibe, and it just in terms of the energy of the show, it's pretty amazing. And it's
really stunning.
I feel like it's your Whatcha, and I'm hijacking
no
too, but so much of just the film craft is so doggone strong.
Oh, absolutely. It is. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm thinking specifically what's coming to mind right now is twofold. 2 scenes. One, 2 scenes that are representative of many like it. One is in mild spoilers here if you're not watching The Outsider, but there's nothing really given away plot-wise. In episode 2 or 3, the jogger outside the house.
Yes. Yes.
That's amazing.
That scene, yes.
That scene's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, just the way that is framed and crafted and shot.
Yes.
So there's that one. And then I think it's the most recent episode, which again is 5 as of this recording. The shot, it's one long shot of Mendelsohn in the foreground and the wife in the background. And do you remember this?
Yes.
And it's
the
scene itself. We are so used to quick cuts,
right,
and kind of paint over sort of maybe poor performance, maybe or just weak performance or other sort of errors or weaknesses in kind of, I don't know, setting or costume, who knows what, but we're so used to quick cuts. And to have some of these scenes that just hang, but they don't just hang there. They do things in frame as well. And so that one, if you remember, it's the one where he's in the foreground, she's in the background. She walks in, he's in focus, but he never looks at her. She walks into the back and it focuses on her. It does that camera trick. And she's talking to him. She says she's going to leave. She leaves the room and it focuses back on him. And it's so simple, but I was just mesmerized by that scene.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, and the other thing that I have to praise, and I'm right there with you with the general tone, the craft behind everything that you're seeing, but also I have always liked him, but Ben Mendelsohn in this is so good. He is outstanding in this TV series, and so I really appreciate his presence, what he brings. He has embodied this character, which again, I read the book, and so I was picturing Ralph Anderson completely differently than Ben Mendelsohn, but he has embodied this character in such a profound way. He's just exceptional. He's really exceptional. And then I also have to sing some praises of Cynthia Erivo, who plays Holly Gibney.
She's great.
And I've seen her come up a little bit. I had recently watched the film Bad Times at the El Royale, and she's in that. And she was also in, although I haven't seen it yet, but plan to soon, the film Harriet that was, and she's, I believe, nominated for an Oscar for it. But she's outstanding in The Outsider. But it also just has a fantastic cast. I mean, Jason Bateman's presence. You have
Bill Camp.
Bill Camp's in it. Yeah. So I mean, anyway, we're only about halfway through it. It remains to be seen if it will maintain the strength. Because something that you do not know is
don't tell me.
No, it's not kidding. No. The first 3 episodes represent the first more than half of the book. So what I'm fascinated to see in their 10-episode arc is, how will they progress this story now from here? Because they truncated, they adapted a few things that are a little different, which I will not go into right now, but the major narrative beats of the first 3 episodes comprise like the first maybe a little bit more than half of the book. And so it's
without spoiling specifics, the major twist, where in the book does that fall?
Are you talking about the event of episode 2?
Yeah.
That is a little bit less than halfway.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it practically opens episode 2, but that does not happen until almost midway through the book, and then it follows with Holly's arrival and everything. And so
you just it is an example, and these are hard to find, but it is an example of everyone involved operating at just maximum, right? Like
absolutely right.
Because the story itself is actually pretty standard King fare.
It's pretty direct,
but the adaptation is pitch perfect cinematography and direction. Exemplary
really
writing, and you just have actors who know how to act.
And
the reason you can sing the praises of Mendelsohn, not just because he's a great actor, but because the camera lets him do it.
They don't try to hide him.
You just hang with these people. And now, don't get me wrong, someone could criticize its pace, and I don't know that I would utterly disagree with that. Like, it's kind of slow in spots, but it just kind of depends on, how you dig in or don't.
Sure.
Part of that is just the energy and vibe and mood.
No, I agree. I don't want it brisker than it is. Like, it's very much on point with kind of what I was expecting. I will say one final note about The Outsider, that to your note about adaptation, they have already in episode 4 and actually episode 5. This is non-spoiler territory, but you will know what I'm referring to. In episode 5, there is an uncovering of a mystery, or at least I'll say it this way, that there is a potential solution to the mystery at the center of the story, or at least that there's do you remember what I'm talking about, the mythology that they sort of start discussing? from episode
You
5?
want to know something funny?
Yeah.
So, unrelated to The Outsider, but up until a few days ago, my wife was out of town for 10 days straight. And so I, with just magnificent assists from my parents, who have also moved to our neck of the woods, our sitter and my mother-in-law, was able to take care of all 3 of my children during that time frame. However, what it did do is left me a sack of potatoes in terms of my energy by the end of it. And on a Friday night, you'll love this. On a Friday night, I dropped all my kids off at my parents' house where they were going to have a sleepover. Came home, and Nanny, mother-in-law, who likes to watch scary stuff with me,
Sure,
we were watching The Outsider.
Right.
It was 7 p.m. on a Friday night. We turned on Outsider episode 5, and in like 10 minutes I was out and didn't even know it until like 40 minutes later when it was like basically wrapping up, and I was like, I am not sure what has happened.
What
I'm
just
gonna
happened?
have to rewatch this episode because I don't really know.
So funny. Oh my gosh. Well, okay, so
7 o'clock on a Friday night.
I will just say they present a potential. There is a profound and impossible mystery at the center of The Outsider. In episode 5, they present a potential solution to that mystery. Where I'm going with that, all of that to say, their method of presenting that solution is very different from the book, and I consider it better. So it's interesting to see, like, all these things. They've truncated the first half. Now they're starting to introduce some new information that is not from the book, or at least is presenting in a different way from the book. So I'm very excited to see how they land this. I'm rooting for them to land it in a really effective way because I'm in on this show. I think it's really outstanding, and I highly, highly recommend it. If you have HBO and can handle some grittier crime fare, it's really, really strong, and so highly recommend The Outsider. So with that, and without further ado, that has been yet another episode of What You Watching, What You Reading, What Are You Listening To?
Yes, it's like I can see it climbing the ranks. It's like I can visualize this
I was
list.
like, I'm
and it's
landing
just
at
going
number
up
one,
and up
mother
and
effer.
up. Yeah, you're gonna make it number 1. Mama, I'm going to Disney World.
I'm winning.
They spinning. So Reed, goodness
Nathan.
gracious. So we are.
Nathan.
This is week 2. We covered the Joker last week. I keep doing that. We covered Joker last week.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was so excited to cover Joker and Parasite because they're such powerhouses of filmmaking. And I just don't know that I reckoned with the massive whale that trying to actually engage them in a conversational way would,
Sure.
invite, right?
Yeah, right.
So, but before we even, kind of wade in those deeper waters, so we're in week 2 of a 4-week run. The best. These weren't the top 4, right?
No, in fact, yeah, these were from the top 10, but we
That's
decided
right. Yeah.
what we wanted to discuss.
Yes.
Writ large.
So listeners voted on their top 10. Those were posted to Instagram this last week, if you're listening to this day of release. And it's Joker, Parasite. Next week, we are going to be covering Ari Aster's Midsommar, which, good Lord, who knows what that's going to be like conversationally.
Right.
But as another plug, it is so far the year of guests. We decided what better way to make a movie about, drug use and penises more awkward than to have a woman in on the conversation. So
I mean, I don't know that Midsommar's about the second thing, but
it features them in certain fashion,
relatively
in a number
prominently.
of places. Right.
Yeah, that's
that
okay.
said, we are
just
next
made it
week
weird.
feature.
It didn't have to be weird, but now could have just been the thing we don't discuss. But
that
instead,
is well, I mean, it's gonna be discussed.
Oh, will it? Will it? Because I think we had some choice there. Will that be a major staple? Is it going to be on your likes, dislikes, or your scares?
Yes. The answer is yes.
What you're looking for.
But next week we will be once more having literary correspondent Meredith Curran, who last was on the show circa Funny or Die and Young Frankenstein. We tried to have her on a couple of times and, are finally able to make it work with Midsommar. You can see her post every Wednesday plugging various literary works of the horror genre, which is great. So she'll be on next week with Midsommar, and then we'll wrap up this month with Ready or Not, a heck of a lot of a fun little horror flick.
Indeed.
So today, man, we are discussing Bong Joon-Ho's Parasite. Now, I had seen this in the theater with my wife, one of the few times that has ever happened in the last couple years. And it was a little bit before you got to it, and that's not a dig. I'm genuinely curious because you and I both know when these movies gain a life of their own in terms of box office and buzz, that it can sometimes detract from the viewing experience. And so I would love to hear and to be clear, I didn't see it at the forefront. I knew it was out there and developing buzz, and then it finally hit one of our theaters and we went. And then it was probably another month or so before you were able to. But speak to your experience of the hype versus the experience.
So I will say that, to me, had I seen it... Okay, so let's say I had seen this in the theater early in its release, first couple of weeks. It is hard for me to tell if I would have joined the throng of greatest ever of all time everything. There are some people, I remember before I saw it, there was a big deal made on by some of the film community with which I'm associated of saying Parasite has now beaten The Godfather as the highest ranked item on all of Letterboxd, and so there was tremendous.
Is that true?
I believe it was at a particular point. I don't know if it is still true. But at one point, I forget what it had beat it out. I think it was Godfather. But at one point, Parasite was the number one highest ranked film on Letterboxd, on all of Letterboxd. And so I went into
Which
it
is
with,
just wild.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I went into it with this, there's a tremendous amount of affection behind this film. And when I saw it, so I've seen a lot of, I say a lot, I've seen several of Bong Joon-Ho's other films, and he's an exceptional filmmaker. He's an outstanding storyteller, very inventive. He's got his own unique style. His stories have these unexpected surprises in them, and they cross genres. They're a little bit hard to classify in the best way possible because they're so unique. So I was a little bit familiar with the kinds of things he was interested in, but when I went into it, so I remember feeling when I finished it, it was like old Lost. As soon as it was done, I was like, I'm gonna need to watch that again.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can fully process everything that's happening. It did not immediately strike me as this, oh yes, I understand why everybody, honestly, in this moment, I'm a little, I wouldn't say confused, but it surprises me that it has struck such a high chord with such a broad audience.
Sure.
It's an outstanding film. That's not a ding on the film, but it's particular. It's about certain particular things, and in a very particular way that makes me wonder why this has caught on with so many people. But I mean, yes, I remember. I think I texted you and the rest of our pod buddies and was like, Parasite is freaking fantastic. My wife and I were discussing it after the fact and discussing well, what was this? And there are still things that I feel like were metaphors within the movie that I can't quite grasp or wrangle down.
Sure.
That maybe, the right think piece or maybe this conversation will help me sort of contextualize in a way that I can understand my thoughts and feelings about it. But yeah, I mean, it was not overhyped for me. It was, I still, like I said, don't know exactly the reason why it has captured the imaginations of so many people, but it's an outstanding film. It's an absolutely outstanding film.
Now, have you seen it twice, or did you just end up?
Yes.
Okay,
I've seen it twice. Yeah.
I as I've thought about this film and not the narrative necessarily similarities, although there is some overlap that it has to Joker, but the layers and the levels and the, as you just used the word, metaphors, which becomes a prevalent idea in the film.
Yeah.
I'm kind of intimidated by its magnitude. And it's funny, I had this image come to mind recently, and honestly was inspired loosely by our Joker conversation as I just pondered, because you and I more or less get one shot at these conversations. You know what I mean? And
for
it's
the
like,
most part, sure.
And you want to do right by our dialogue and interplay. Right. You want to do right by the film,
right?
And have an honest assessment.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes they're so jam packed. It's picking apart the pieces is tough. So I don't know. This image came to my mind, and in the spirit of our love for Mike Flanagan, we'll call it Hill House. But this image of a house where the house is representative of whatever film we're discussing. And, maybe it's the movie Final Destination, and it's more like a, trailer type of house.
I was wondering
there's
what
just
you're gonna
not
do.
much.
Sure.
When you go inside, it's just tiny. It's a tiny house. It's like you walk in, you're like, there's the walls.
Sometimes
And
tiny houses are cute.
I'm not arguing they're not. I'm just saying there's not much to them. They're
Just-
tiny.
Sure.
They don't have a lot to offer spatially. So, and then you have movies like A Parasite, when you look at the sheer enormity of the house and you're like, I don't know. So we conversationally wander into the foyer, which is banter and Whatcha Watchins, and just like checking out the tchotchkes and the trinkets in the foyer and checking our hair in the mirror. And then you just start wandering the house, and odds are good you're not going to get to every room in that house, especially if it's a movie like this.
Right.
And it's funny. I was thinking, I know you listened to the Star Wars conversation, but on there I reference, and I think I finally understood what she was asking. My wife, the day I was going to record Star Wars with Ian, she asked this question that was a little oddly phrased, but again, like I said, I think now I understand it a little more, asking, do I ever dread the conversation? And it was a strong word. And
sure.
She's an introvert, an Enneagram 9, and just, I don't know, public speaking is not a thing she craves like you and I do. And he's like, no, put the microphone in my face.
I'll take that.
Right. Exactly. So, and yet, as of an hour ago, I was like, I don't know. I don't know. There's too much here. I feel like I'm trying to speak a foreign language, having never studied it, by trying to wrestle down all the things about this movie. So, I do feel like it's worth just kind of doing some cursory glances at the film before we kind of wade into the grand ballroom, if you will.
Well, why don't we start as a proposal? Why don't we start with just surprise? Why don't we start with just generally summarizing the major narrative beats of the film? Just in case there are people who are like, I don't know if I want to watch Parasite. Let me listen to Readin' Nathan talk about it first, because we're going to spoil everything, and it's a film that deserves to be seen.
And there are things that can be spoiled if you haven't seen it. Major. Like, there are major surprises in this film, and so we would encourage you, just so everybody's aware, we would encourage you to please go and watch it first. But in case you're just listening to us regardless, or whatever, so do you mind if I briefly summarize it? No, as a really succinct note, ideally, before you start that, despite how it sounds and even how you just outlined it, for anyone listening, like, this is, it's there's a lot going on, but it's incredibly accessible. It is it moves. It's
very quickly paced.
A bit thrilling. It's got an excellent plot to it. It is not just some sort of art house hoity-toity type of exercise.
No, absolutely. So the premise in general, we first see this sort of impoverished family who are struggling to, steal the neighbor's Wi-Fi. But very early on in the conversation, or in the film, they are gifted with from one of the it's a nuclear family, so it's a mother, father, daughter, son, and the son, his friend gifts them with this. What are they called? It's a special kind of rock that I'm forgetting. Do you remember what they're called?
I think they're referred to as a scholar rock.
Scholar rock. Okay, yeah. It's this fanciful, artfully, carved little rock that is supposed to bring wealth and good fortune and all this stuff. Well, this friend of the son's also gives him a lead on a tutoring position. And then here was the first moment where I was like, wow, this is really cool, because the son goes and accepts the tutoring position, does well. This very, very wealthy family whose daughter he is now tutoring, and the wealthy family. Suddenly he's like, oh, you know what? Your son does art. Well, I used to know this. I forget exactly how they contextualize it, but it's like, I used to know somebody who was an art teacher that was really in high demand. I'd be happy to reach out to them or whatever. And then it's his sister that he brings in, and the sister poses as this high-profile art teacher. Then they find a way to work in a very manipulative way. They get the driver, the family's hired driver, fired, and then find a way to get the dad an interview for the job. And then so now the dad is their driver, the daughter is their art teacher, and the son is their daughter's tutor. And then they find a way to, probably the most insidious way possible, they get the housekeeper fired.
So wild.
It's outrageous. They get the housekeeper fired, and then the mom is now the housekeeper. So this whole family,
and they're all operating under false
under
identities.
the same roof.
Yeah.
And they're operating under false identities in the same roof, and this very wealthy family is unbeknowingly funding this entire impoverished family through these different jobs. Well, that's the first basically half of the film. And this is the last major warning for spoilers.
Wild.
This is the last major warning. There is a surprise in the middle of the film that basically the fired housekeeper comes back. And when she comes back, it is at a time when the rich family has gone away on a camping trip. So naturally, the rich family's away on a camping trip, thinking that their housekeeper is just going to be staying at their house and house sitting for them, not realizing that the housekeeper has certainly invited her whole family in to have a little, hangout party. We're going to eat all the food and drink all the booze and just sort of hang out. Well, the fired housekeeper shows up and says, I left something in the basement. Can you please just let me in? I'll go get this thing in the basement. And, it happens. Things progress. The thing down in the basement is her husband, who has been living down in this sort of basement dwelling area for God knows how long, while she was the housekeeper for this rich family. And emerging out of that, without just completely unraveling the whole film, emerging out of that, this now fired housekeeper finds out that these new employees are all one family, and that they have deceived the rich family, and that sparks this sort of suspenseful little cat and mouse game, while the family then sort of returns from their camping excursion. And it's just, it is a bonkers bananas film, which if you haven't seen it, I feel bad because we have spoiled so much of it. But I wanted you to have some context for some of the things in which we're going to kind of talk about, just as an entry point. But I will say, before I pivot over to you for whatever cursory things you want to put on it, that basement reveal, this is what I wrote down. That basement reveal is one of the strongest and most energizing surprises in the last whole decade of cinema. I almost came off the chair when I was like, what? Because I never saw that coming. I didn't even think that was a remote possibility on the table. But that was wild.
Well,
absolutely wild.
Because it changes everything
yes.
while being utterly organic.
Yes. It's completely baked in. You hear earlier, or you're reminded earlier, that when the rich, wealthy husband is talking to now his new driver, which is the father of this impoverished family, Mr. Kim, he's talking to him, is like, she was a great housekeeper, never crossed the line. Only thing, she ate too much food. Couldn't believe the amount of food she ate. And so it's like that little comment takes on such meaning when you realize, because she was siphoning down food to her husband hiding down in the basement. That's amazing,
because I didn't even put that together, that line.
Oh, my gosh.
This is what, I will say this, I don't know how to bracket this film because on the one hand, I don't love it in that emotional, sentimental kind of way that I
Okay,
enjoy
sure.
movies sometimes.
Right.
But my respect is so high that
Respect.
it.
I'm sorry, I could.
No, please. It's hysterical. That is a line from the movie, and it's delivered by a crazy person, and it's in English when most of the movie is 99.9% of the movie is not in English. So yeah, it's hysterical that you keep bringing that up. But yes. But my respect for the film is so high that it suddenly starts to blur into, I think I love what is happening in and about this film.
Right.
I've seen it 2.5 times now, and it keeps getting funnier every single time I see it. But to your point about the Mr. Park's comment of the fired housekeeper siphoning food, what's so impressive about this film is each time you watch it, there's new little nuggets like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Oh,
how that's in there.
absolutely.
And for clarity's sake, for our conversation, primarily it's the Park family, which is the wealthy folks.
Yes.
Who have a young son who's 9 and a teenage daughter, and the Kim family, which are the imposter crew.
Yes.
Whose kids are older. They're late teens, maybe even bordering on 20-ish. And then the housekeeper and the husband. So those are the primary players. And, I was worried going into my theater viewing. I was like, gosh, the weight is so high or the bar is so high for what this has to do.
Right.
But to your point, one, that first hour, the plot in motion is so compelling. You're like,
yes,
this is crazy.
Yes.
Because even hearing you describe it just now, someone who's not seen the film and is listening to this conversation and has chosen not to watch the film, listening to that, it's so asinine, right? It's like, well, that doesn't work. That's dumb. That's the essence of contrivance, right? But in the film, it just works, which is why he got nominated for original screenplay. But
it's amazing.
So that is the first hour. But yeah, that basement reveal, it's like, okay, I don't have a footing right now.
Yeah.
And that's thrilling and terrifying. And the second half of that film is why this movie gets nudged over into consideration in the horror category because of the way these socioeconomic levels of a society play out against each other.
Right.
I do wonder if it's worth a few kind of cursory things like, we've talked about the plot. Now the only other Bong Joon-Ho film I've seen is Snowpiercer, and I wouldn't have the memory to know if any of these players are in that film, but I do know, or at least my understanding is Mr. Kim, the driver, is either a pretty big Korean star or is also, and maybe also, is in a number of his films.
Do
you know if that's
I
correct?
don't know about his status in Korean cinema, but he is definitely in quite a few of Bong Joon-Ho's films.
That might be what I'm remembering.
He was in, so it's a kind of a silly story, but the very first Bong Joon-Ho film I saw was actually Memories of Murder. It goes all the way back to the days when I was working at the retail store, and every Friday, you as an employee, because you would get lots of promotional items from labels and people that wanted the store to carry their music and carry their movies and stuff like that. So you were privileged to take a handful of these promotional items. That was just one of the perks of working at that retail store at that time. Well, one of them, coincidentally, was this little Korean thriller film called Memories of Murder that I was like, oh, this looks interesting. I like movies. Let me take this home. So I saw it and really, really enjoyed it. But that was my first exposure to him. Then saw The Host, and I've also seen Mother, Snowpiercer, of course, and Okja.
Yeah.
So I've seen most of his output.
There's a world in which the ideas present thematically can kind of overtake everything, but I don't want to completely abandon kind of some of the actual text of the film. What you didn't describe, because it's a bit ancillary, although becomes the driving force of the narrative, is so within the film. This is a plot summary aspect, but to get to the talking about it, and the things you notice when you see it another time, at least. In the text of the film, the 10-year-old boy, the 9-year-old boy, has some version of like a PTSD. He's got some struggles from a thing that happened to him.
Yes.
And the mom, once you learn this story, that scene is just amazing.
Oh, it's outstanding.
When they're at the table and it pans
Yes.
down to the cake and the lighting and all that is amazing.
Oh, yeah. It's wonderful.
So you learn on his birthday, a particular year, the young boy stole down to the kitchen and took his birthday cake out of the fridge and sat on the floor and was eating his birthday cake. And when he was doing this,
Oh, my God.
the unbeknownst to the viewer, basement dwelling man
Yes.
starts to ascend in the darkness, and the little boy sees him. And as the mother understands his story, the kid's story, the kid has relayed that he's seen a ghost. And I don't remember if he passes out explicitly, but like just has
Some
shock,
trauma.
goes
Yes.
into shock and trauma from what he thinks is a ghost in the house.
Right. Yes.
So ultimately that's the propulsion for a lot of the story is, what in the world, this ghost, this kid. Did you notice how the film climaxes, you know this, but the film climaxes with a birthday party,
Right.
For the song, the little boy.
Right.
And the mom tells, I can't remember if it's Jessica, the anglicized name for the sister tutor. She tells somebody, we're going to give him his trauma recovery cake to celebrate, to kind of get over this.
I do. Yes. I remember
And
that.
do you remember so much of this film is pitch perfect. Like it is tightly wound and plotted to perfection. And they walk out into the courtyard, and Respect Man, the basement dwelling husband, has
Yes.
come up the stairs and has made his presence up in the air known, and he walks out and stabs Jessica. Well,
Right.
she falls. Do you remember this moment? She
I'm
falls, and
visualizing it.
standing behind her
Is the boy.
is the song.
Yes.
Who's upon seeing who he remembers as a ghost, eyes roll back in his head, and he passes
And
out.
faints. Right.
Right.
But
But just the interconnectedness of the trauma recovery cake. We're going to do the thing that
Yes,
this boy
yes.
experienced first time, and it's going to just repeat itself in a whole new
Oh my gosh.
scenario is wild.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Do you have any real specific likes, dislikes, or scares you want to talk about? I would encourage you to do that if you have some that you...
Well, I mean, so many things are just sort of tied to themes. But I will say, just almost as a trivial bit, that the house itself was a set that was specifically constructed and designed for the film and to service what the film was trying to do. I will mention, just in terms of where we're kind of generally talking about the subtlety and the moments that are significant beyond just their individual scope. I'm sure you've seen it a couple of times now, so I'm sure you've probably picked up on the opening scene, like the significance of that opening, of some of the moments of the opening scene regarding the stink bugs. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I mean, I know what scene you're referring
Oh
to.
my
I know
gosh.
exactly what you're honing in on.
So maybe this is possibly something that would pivot, an avenue into some of the broader themes of the film. But a recurring thing that happens is that Mr. Kim, one of the first moments that they are all in the house together, that the imposters and the Park family are all in the house together. The young boy, Desong, is that his name?
Yep.
Desong.
I don't know if that's how you say it exactly, but yes, that's
Right.
phonetic.
And
Yeah.
I should apologize to everybody for any name that I butcher on this podcast. But the one of the first things he does is he goes up and he sniffs the housekeeper, and he sniffs Mr. Kim, and he's like, they smell the same. He's like, they smell exactly alike. And then he's like, yeah, and he said the two children smell the same way, and he's like, oh, what are you talking about? And that prompts the imposter family to like, oh, we got to use different deodorant or different detergent now, and blah blah blah. And so that becomes a recurring thing where once the Park family have returned from their camping trip, and the husband and wife are laying on the couch. That's a weird scene. When the husband and wife are laying on the couch, and then he's like, I smell Mr. Kim. Like, I smell him, and you remember from the birthday party that the visual moment that incenses Mr. Kim to do what he finally does is when Mr. Park sees this bloodied guy in front of him, and what he does is the basement guy. And what he does is holds his nose as he tries to move the guy out of the way so he can get his keys. That's what incenses Mr. Kim. So there's this recurring idea of the stench, right? The smell. Well, in the opening scene of the film, Nathan, he's sitting there and there's a bug on his thing, and he flicks it. He's like, and then they go on. What's happening? In the town, they are spraying for the stink bugs, and they're fumigating it, and they sit there, and they even say they allow the fumigation to enter it because the dad, Mr. Kim, says it'll kill all the stink bugs, and they say, yeah, there are too many stink bugs, and it's like right there in that opening, like to them, these bugs are just what? They're little pests. They're pests that are annoyances. They're these parasitic things, and then I found it. Especially with a film as intentional as this is, that has to be significant, tied to the way that smell and stench specifically plays so much into what we see progress later. But I thought that was incredible. The second time I watched it through, I was like, oh man, kill all the stink bugs. Anyway.
Well, I mean, I think that I don't know that I have the academic brain to really have the most cogent conversation I would want to have on this, because so much of the film, so much of the sub and text of this film is about class and about social strata and those dynamics, and I'm just intimidated by trying to tackle some of that because I just don't have the sort of academic whatever to kind of properly discuss it in a way I would love to, but
right.
I why the basement reveal is so high, and we're in theme, so
sure.
We can touch on surface stuff as we want, but we're here and it's going to be wading into deep waters. Why the reveal of the basement dwellers are so wild from a thematic standpoint. As an asterisk to this, I'm kind of convinced that everyone in this film is an antagonist and a protagonist. You are both on board with and frustrated by every character. Like
sure,
and we'll get into that in a minute. But why the basement dweller reveal is so powerful is because of the stink bug scene. It is because the truth that however low you are, there is always someone lower.
Yeah.
And however high you are, there's always someone higher. And you've got these social dynamics at work of, at the outset, the low income, impoverished, working in the gig economy, pizza box folding, just trying to crib someone else's Wi-Fi Kim family.
Right.
And then you've got the well-off Park family. That's how you're presented with the dynamic. But then you are given someone lower than the Kims, literally.
Yes.
And socially in the basement couple. Well, I would argue that the film is also positing that the architect and the former homeowner is meant to be the strata above the Parks. In other words, there's always someone higher and there's always someone lower.
Yes. I wouldn't argue with that.
And I think what's so arresting to me about this film is, and it's interesting because I did write down, I don't think this is a nihilistic film at all, but I do think it is meant to serve as cautionary tale. A plot that we didn't go over in the summary, because there's a lot that happens in this film, is at the end when Mr. Park recoils at the stench of the basement dweller that has just been... How did the basement husband get taken out at the very end?
I believe he gets stabbed by the mom, doesn't he?
Yes, you're right.
Yes.
So the basement man stabs Jessica, the daughter. Jessica's mom, posing as the housekeeper, stabs basement man. The dynamics of the relationship of this imposter family start to trickle into the cognizance of the Park family. Mr. Park goes to basement man, recoils at the stench. Mr. Kim sees the recoil and all that he suffered through this film, which is manifest and exemplified in the rainstorm, the previous scene, sets him off, and he goes and stabs Mr. Park and then vanishes.
Yes.
And what we don't know until the very end is he goes into the basement to live out ostensibly the rest of his life.
Yes, he's there indefinitely.
Yeah, so I don't think it's nihilistic. I think it's a cautionary tale of how we in various social and economic strata coexist or not with those above and below us. And I'm so intimidated to kind of have this conversation because in a certain way, I want this house that we're talking through to not be as big as it is, so we can kind of unpack all the nooks and crannies, but it is just too friggin' big. And here's what's funny, Reed, is let's see. Of my initial notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15,
oh, good Lord.
16, 17. There are about 16 things that could be thematic conversation. Now, a lot of those are entwined and sort of correlated to each other.
Yeah.
And I was all ready to be like, man, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to throw a stone across the water and just going to do all these little things. And Reed, I went and just because the film just came out to rent, I actually ended up purchasing it because I discovered some iTunes gift cards and I wanted to give it another go.
Sure.
And the daggone, I'm trying hard not to cuss here. The cover art, the tagline of the film. Do you know what the tagline of the film is, Reed? On the cover?
No. What?
And this took my 16 thematic points and just was like, no, don't worry about that. Figure out how to talk about this. The tagline of the film is act like you own the place.
Oh my gosh. Act like you own the place.
And Reed,
Wow.
I am so just stirred to my core by, at least in my brain, what I'm going to have a terrible time articulating with my mouth, the implications practically and spiritually for that phrase, act like you own the place.
Right.
And as a springboard, and I sincerely want you, I don't intend this to be monologue. I won't, because I'm going to need help, but something to get us going, because there's a way in which Tattoos on the Heart and Bryan Stevenson are all going to speak in dialogue with Parasite. But if you rewatch this film, so a lot of my initial 15 themes are a degree of specificity. It's like, oh, that person said that line, and that could be a theme,
Right.
But on a second and a half viewing, in light of this phrase, act like you own the place, what is just screaming in this film is pretending. And it isn't just in the imposter family, although that's its most explicit representation.
Right.
But it's reinforced throughout. You have the little boy. Do you remember Kevin and the teen daughter have a conversation about how the son pretends in these flights of fancy he has when he looks at the sky? Do you remember this at all?
Yes. Oh yeah.
So he does it.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the teen daughter who just inherently, and I'm worried I'm about to learn this in a very profound way in the coming years, naturally wants to pretend they are more mature than they are. So there's just some inherent character stuff there.
Yes.
You've got Mrs. Park, who is kind of pretending like she's got it all together and does not whatsoever.
Nope. Exactly.
I'm going to posit from the text of the film, you've got Mr. Park, who pretends that he loves his wife. He may on a certain level, but he gets asked real explicitly more than once by Mr. Kim.
Yes.
And he brushes it off and kind of.
Yeah.
And
his
even
answer
says,
the first time
you could call it love.
Yes.
Right? Or
that's
something
exactly
like that.
Right. Yes. That's his first answer is he says, sure, we'll call it love. Yes.
Oh, God. And so you've got them. You've got the basement folk who, if you recall, are inherited from the architect.
Yes.
Right?
From the previous homeowner. Yes.
I mean, that housekeeper may be the embodiment of act like you own the place, right? Like she assumes an ownership about this home. Anyway, my point being is there's who we act like and who we are. And it's funny because I kept interrogating this thought throughout the day. This is why I dreaded this conversation, because I don't know how to tie these things up. And that's okay. I'm just saying, when you go into a quote unquote public setting like what we do here and attempt a dialogue, it feels valuable to have some measure of place to land, but I don't totally know how to get there. And Tattoos on the Heart has a quote, and I'm going to reference it here. And I even sent you these. This is how nerdy I was getting with this. But that I want to incorporate here. And it says, this is Gregory Boyle, founder of Homeboy Industries. And he says, at Homeboy Industries, we seek to tell each person this truth. They are exactly what God had in mind when God made them. And then we watch from this privileged place as people inhabit this truth. Adjacent to that, Richard Rohr, I'm sure I referenced this quote at some point last year, but it just screams at me in light of this attempted conversation. One of the most revelatory sort of statements I've read in the last 12 months is in, I'm pretty sure, Universal Christ, and he says, God comes to you disguised as your life. And I just keep trying to comprehend in my spirit this tension between owning and acting like owning, and how difficult a time we have. In Tattoos on the Heart, he quotes some other person at a point in the book, and it says, God is who is right in front of you. And these notions, man, these notions of performance and imposterness, willful imposterness, right? Like,
yes,
Mr. Park knows he's putting on. Now, doesn't mean he's not attracted to her. Clearly that happens, but
right.
But he knows he's putting on. The Kim family knows what they're doing. This is what I mean by they're all protagonists and they're all antagonists.
Right.
We develop a certain empathy because it's like, well, who's the villain here? It's hard to say. Like, you kind of understand everybody's point of view, which is masterful filmmaking.
Can I interject without
please.
breaking your thought?
Please.
A statement that Bong Joon-Ho had made about the film. It's a very long quote, and I'm not going to cite all of it. I might come back to different parts of the little paragraph, but the statement specifically that I wanted to hone in on is he says, as a depiction of ordinary people who fall into an unavoidable commotion, this film is a comedy without clowns, a tragedy without villains, all leading to a violent tangle and a headlong plunge down the stairs. And
Wow.
I thought that was a really that's again from the director.
Sure.
And then he closes that quote with, "You are all invited to this unstoppably fierce tragicomedy." And I thought that was, again, incredibly profound. Your talk about, like, who's the villain here? And he's like, well, it's a tragedy without villains, and it's a comedy without clowns. And I'm like, wow, that is really sort of affirming to what I'm hearing in they're all protagonists and they're all antagonists.
Yes, and even that's just meant to say they're human beings like us.
Yes.
But applying to that this notion of inability to see God in each other, and a word that becomes prevalent in the works of Gregory Boyle is the word kinship. And he has this very when he's talking about doing life with these homeboys and homegirls, as they are affectionately called, he talks about kinship, and he says serving is good, but it's just a start. Kinship, which is not serving the other, but being one with the other. Jesus was not a man for others. He was one with them. There's a world of difference in that. And I guess all I'm trying to hone in on is evil is a strong word, but the wickedness of systemic imposed barriers to recognizing the God in front of you. Right?
Yeah, right.
And in a tragedy without villains, which is in many ways can describe life itself, the tragedy is our inability to reach across those barriers. It's our inability to not recoil at the stench of someone below us.
Right.
And I was even wrestling with the title of the film, Parasite. Parasite, the word, invokes hierarchy, right? It's
yes, yeah,
host and parasite. It is dominant and submissive. It is superior and inferior. But what we're called to is proximity and kinship. And I think that's why this film is so arresting to me and so fast. I mean, it's a hell of a movie. Like from a pure,
absolutely.
I intentionally use the word movie there. Like it is a great thrill ride of a movie.
Oh, absolutely.
But the punch that's packed is all of this stuff. I mean, it's not hidden that Kevin references this is metaphorical more than once.
And it's funny because I struggled to really grasp. There were some things in this film that I did struggle to grab hold of, and that was one of the things was, what did he mean by this is so metaphorical? I recognized and I sort of took it to mean this is an omen, this is a sign, this is fortuitous, this is providential, whatever you want to say. But that language was so distinct. I struggled to really grasp, like, what does he mean? This is all so metaphorical. And I just sort of encapsulated it in my own understanding as, oh, this is a sign. The same way I or somebody else might joke like, wow, I'm lucky today, I should buy a lottery ticket, or something like that. That's just the way I contextualized it. But
I think that's a helpful, kind of spoke on the wheel here, and which is to say, do you remember? So the way men, I think, is the friend who bequeaths them the stone and the job, the entry into this new life of theirs.
Right.
Yes, he identifies the rock as it is said to bring families material wealth. And that is the key right there, is these things we buy into. These I don't even understand the weight of what I'm about to say. The sin of capitalism. The ways we get sold on the good life that is available materially in an economic structure if we just pursue it, right? And so the metaphor here is they are gifted this stone that is said to bring families material wealth. Do you remember at the end, towards the end, right before the party, when the Kims, except mom, are trying to rest on the floor of a gymnasium because their entire section of town has been washed away.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Kevin is cradling this rock.
Yes.
And the rock is used as a bludgeon against him. That this is the metaphor, that your dogged pursuit, which does not mean we let the poor live in their squalor. That's not
no,
what
of course.
Means.
No, of course.
It just means we get sold.
Right.
We get sold. And we are in a political season right now where a lot of people are trying to sell you something. And I was engaged with a text conversation today with someone where I was really wrestling, and I was like, so much of what is peddled to us is under the very thinly veiled guise of benefit. In other words, I, X political candidate, am going to do Y for you. Like it's a thing offered ostensibly as gift to a population group or whatever.
Right.
But it is so explicitly and obviously, with those with eyes to see and ears to hear, a transactional bargain.
Yes.
And
which is a great way to say it. And
I think what is so challenging to me in these days, and why the heart, I think I've said this before. My wife sometimes is like, why do you read this stuff? In other words, like things that so weigh my heart down. And I think it's in part because I am done with the transaction. I don't want it.
Right.
And what is so heartbreaking about this film is you're watching a microcosm representative of the whole system.
Sure.
Which is everyone participating in what they perceive to be a transactional social contract.
Right.
That is really nothing. Right? It is not. And if I can pivot in here, a tragedy without villains. Yes. And it's a tragedy because we have settled for the transaction when it's transformation that is required. It is transformation. It is the work of, I mean, even in the film, they are Koreans who buy in to American colonial ideology by Native American emblems. Right?
Oh, right. Yes. Yes.
It's everywhere. And it substitutes transformation for transaction. I think why I put myself through the ringer sometimes on the things I read, and the Bryans actually don't at all, and I hope it doesn't come off this way suddenly mean to turn this into, oh, Nathan's awesome. That's not at all what I mean.
No, I know.
I'm so disenchanted, and I don't, and sometimes I get duped, just like everybody, but I'm so disenchanted with transactional living, and real work is real, lasting, useful, worthwhile, that matters at all, that sees enemy as friend, is transformational and requires transformation, and requires being able to prophetically call out systems like capitalism, like whatever. That's not, oh, you're a socialist. That's not at all what I mean either. And simply saying there are systems in the world that are not the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
And we are called to prophetically name those things, be apart from them, and still interact with, but recognize them for what they are. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, you're fine. So it's funny because in leading up to this conversation, I did not have him on my mind almost at all, but just in the course of this conversation, Rich Mullins keeps coming to mind so much. And I remember a story that I'm going to butcher the telling of, because I did not think to mention him in this podcast, so I didn't, I'm not prepared to speak verbatim, but I remember he told a story about the writing of his song. I believe it was Screen Door. I believe it was the writing for Screen Door, where he said the reason he got the idea for that song is because he picked up a hitchhiker. And when he picked up this hitchhiker, the hitchhiker smelled so bad. And he drove for a while with the hitchhiker in, and then he could not stand the smell anymore. So he said, I'm so sorry, this is my exit, I'm going to have to let you out. And so he let the hitchhiker out, and then waited until the hitchhiker was a good, decent way down the road so that he would not see him pulling back onto the freeway and not taking the exit and traversing on. And so he said just the whole experience really got under his skin in terms of his own hypocrisy and how, and I remember he used this phrase, and I wish I could quote this verbatim. I just wish I was prepared to speak to it. But I remember he said, sometimes the kingdom of God is calling you to assist somebody whose smell is going to be in the car a lot longer than they are. And just in this, it's pinging me because Parasite and Stench. It's pinging me because you're going to talk about like being among them and being one of them, and subverting the systems that would categorize them, and identifying the ways in which these people, like the rest of Bong Joon-Ho's quote there, or not the rest of it, but another part of it, he said, in the midst of such a world, who can point their finger at a struggling family locked in a fight for survival and call them parasites? It's not that they were parasites from the start. They are our neighbors, friends, and colleagues who have merely been pushed to the edge of a precipice.
Yes.
And I thought that was truly profound to think about, like, no, this is a difficult thing. These people sort of trying to live in congruence with each other. And one of the things that is so frustrating to me about the ways in which we will pat ourselves on the back for our own accomplishments and then look at someone else and say, well, you should just do what I did. Clearly clearly it's a Betty Crocker recipe that you can just funnel your life through the system and you can just do what I did and that'll be the end of it. And that life just doesn't break down that way. I think there's a reason why, and I know I'm also thinking of, I know that there's a quote that you shared with me earlier, and maybe you can read it here in a moment, but I think there's a reason why Jesus calls out that you visit a person in prison, you feed the hungry, you do these kind of things, and then he says, when you do it to them, you've done it to me. Like, I'm them.
Right.
Like that is, in this, and I don't have the language to wrangle it all down right now, but I am them. I am not this disconnected, disembodied, disenchanted thing. I am them. I'm right there. If you want to see me, if you want to find me, you can find me there, because that's where I'm at. And I feel like that is so significant to our thought processes and painfully absent from our behavior when we navigate and understand the world around us and the people who are in different stations, different positions than us, people who just don't have the same conditions and situations as us. And yeah.
Well, and God, there's so many places to run here, but purely on the other facets of this being a metaphor notion, this is maybe me reading way too much into it, but it's not lost on me that the initiator of this home is an artist. He is a creator.
Yes.
And all of these people in all of their ways interacting with each other. That's really fascinating to me. But to your point in the Rich Mullins story, several Gregory Boyle's work is on my heart and my spirit and just rattling around, and something that was inspired by your Mullins story a minute ago, Rich Mullins.
I know.
It would be really fascinating to have his voice, his prophetic voice, not just his musical voice in this current world.
It would.
So another Boyle quote, and there's so many that we could pull from, but probably one of the most applicable in this moment, and who knows, maybe the last for these few 3 minutes. He says, "Here is what we seek: a compassion that can stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it." And dude, like, what? How? And what's fascinating is I don't know that I would strictly apply that. Now, he means it as the economically poor, right?
Right.
And that is correct. But if this movie is a tragedy with no villains, I think it's not just the economically poor that need our empathy. It's the poor of heart, right?
Yes.
Like the lacking, all of us who buy into this transactional system of living and of economy. And who knows, I'm going to try to begin the steer towards shore here. And something I do want to offer as help, because I need it. And maybe you do, and maybe listeners do, in hearing at least the weight I'm attempting to try to introduce like a rock into the story here, into the conversation here. So went to hear Bryan Stevenson. If listeners haven't, you owe it to your spirit. You owe it to the country, to yourself, to your coming and going, to read the book Just Mercy. Don't just settle for the film, which is strong in its own right, but you really ought to do that.
Yes.
Now, so Stevenson puts forth, he structured his lecture on 4 points. And I'm going to use those 4 points to finish us here without going too deep into all of them, but just to kind of apply them as we seek to figure out what it looks like to exercise transformation of ourselves, because only transformation of ourself yields transformation around us. Like, if you keep buying and selling, nothing changes. And anyway, so his first point is be proximate. He uses this in the context of his experience learning to love and in a certain fashion live alongside death row inmates. Be proximate.
Right.
Be near. Like you've got Mr. Park essentially living alongside Mr. Kim, but there's no proximity, right? There's no care. There's no bridge forming.
I'm just going to insert in
yeah.
here, like, no, I'm not going on a different trail. Mr. Park is constantly talking about crossing the line.
Yeah.
And he's constantly saying, like, they don't cross the line. There is a barrier
yes.
that he has in his mind about his servants not crossing a line. So anyway, just to supplement what you're saying.
As another asterisk there, Boyle has this beautiful imagery when he talks about the gospel narrative story of the disciples lowering the man through the roof.
Yeah.
And he says our job is to eradicate the barriers to wholeness.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, so Stevenson, be proximate. His next statement and point is change the narrative. He uses it. He uses this, and yes, I'm intentionally throwing this in here in the context of, he says, in America, the North won the Civil War, the South won the narrative. And so his work is changing the narrative. Our work is changing the narrative from transactional living that views others on a merit-based system into a transformational position that says, God comes to you disguised as your life. God is whoever is right in front of you. That is the narrative that is true and most holy versus what we tend to operate in. His third point, so be proximate, change the narrative. The third one, Reed, is be hopeful. Nothing happens, nothing changes if you can't believe in the possibility and invest in the possibility of the hope that it can, right?
Wow.
And his fourth and final point that he structures his lecture around is get uncomfortable. And, I would encourage listeners, I would encourage you and encourage myself, like, think about those people you point to as emblems of faithful living and ponder, like, what are they doing like this? You're Gregory Boyle, who, hear me, man. I came away from Brian Stevenson's lecture and said to my friend, I said, I don't know how in my current life to exactly do these things.
Right.
I am a little paralyzed, and that's not good. I don't like that feeling. So it requires me to push a little harder to make those things happen. Brian Stevenson is a single man. He has no children. Like, he has a different means and resource pool by which to execute some of these things. Gregory Boyle,
of course,
is a celibate Jesuit, right?
Right. Of course,
these aren't apples to apples and aren't going to explicitly apply to your life, but it's figuring out the things in your life because God comes to you disguised as your life, and figuring out how to get uncomfortable furthering the work around you of transformation. Anyway, I know that may seem like a weird button to put on the movie Parasite, but this idea of being proximate, being eyes opened and heart aware of, God, what a terrible way to put this, the folks around you who smell. Metaphorically or actually, right?
Yes. It is because it is and we're winding this down, but it is the equation of the stench with inferiority that pervades this film, and I think it is at least reasonable to say, if not specific to say, part of what incenses Mr. Kim to do what he does. Right. The equation of you smell, so you're less than, is much. I mean, you see it on his face when he rails against Mr. Park and finally kills Mr. Park. And again, there's so much going on in that moment, I don't want to reduce it to that's all it's about. But I mean, the film is pretty there that he sees Mr. Park witness this man bloodied and clearly crazy, but this man in front of him, and what Mr. Park does is holds his nose, that he, I've just got to get out of here. And that's the moment that because I think there's something in him that equates to, well, yeah, you think I stink. And so because I stink, then I'm not as good as you, or I'm not on that same playing field as you. And the flooding scene in the film is so oppressive. I mean, the daughter is sitting there with this like cigarette sitting on a toilet that is literally vomiting sewage. Like the toilet is just like spewing up sewage, and their home is flooded and racked. And I think about, this will be my final button on the film. Like I think about, you've brought in act like you own the place. You've brought in all of these Bryan Stevenson quotes, these wonderful observations about how we can help and how we can be helpful. So much stuff from Gregory Boyle as well. The son, when he's going in to see, I just coincidentally happened to write this down, when he's going in to see for the interview for the tutor that starts this whole narrative afloat. And he says, I don't see, I didn't write the whole quote down, but he's like, I don't see this as a deception. He says, I'll go to university next year. Yeah. I just printed out the document a bit early, and in the end, what is the devastating ending that the film leaves you with is him writing a letter to his father being, I'm going to make some money and I'm going to go buy that house, and all you'll have to do is walk up the stairs. But it's been a minute since I've seen it, but I think his line is, all you have to do is walk up the stairs. Mm-hmm. And in this, you combine that with what Bong Joon-Ho said about this plunge down the stairs. Yeah. This hopefulness of, there will be a day when we rise from the basement, when we can rise up. Now, what's devastating about it is the film does not end us. It could just fade out with this fantasy moment of dad walking up the stairs, them hugging and embracing and moving on with their life, but it doesn't. It goes back to the sub-basement where he is sitting, writing that letter, still in the same position. The impression I get is that's probably not going to happen. That's probably never going to happen.
And to your point, I actually just recently saw a quote from Bong Joon-Ho saying the math on, and which illustrates the point of the film, the math on what Kevin would have to do, on the amount of time it would take based on their economic station was 587 years.
Oh, my Lord.
Right.
Oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord.
Which also is just one more metaphor for the barrier, right, that's imposed. This father and son cannot even reconnect because of these things. And,
and I think, too, oh, no, it's incredibly powerful. To leave it on a bit less of a sort of a down note, although the film leaves us with that note, so maybe that's appropriate. But
and to that, I'm sorry to cut you off. It's rudely just there. Sincerely apologize, but I would say, again, it's a cautionary tale. It's
right.
Pay attention.
Right.
Go ahead.
This is part of it, but just Stevenson's observations about like just get uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Take this in the spirit in which it's given. And in the context of the story, not in the ways in which this could be misapplied and misappropriated, but cross a line or two.
Yeah.
Don't listeners are sharp and smart enough to know what I mean by that and what I don't mean. But get uncomfortable and cross a line or two. It's the Mr. Parks of the world and the us's of the world who might be more like Mr. Parks than we'd like to admit that I'm talking to when I say that.
People of privilege. Yes.
People of privilege and the recognition of your position and your status. And I'm not talking about these big social constructs that incense me when people debate over that kind of stuff. I am better off than some people who are near me, and it is my God-given responsibility to be kind, and it is my God-given responsibility to be compassionate, and it is my God-given responsibility to be proximate. And in as much as I am able to try to take that moment, any moment I am given, and maybe use that moment to make someone else's moment a little better, a little easier, a little lighter, a little brighter, whatever it is. Maybe that's through financial means. Maybe that's through the sharing of a cup of cold water, which the scriptures compel us is a profound reward within the kingdom. Whatever it is, take your moment to be proximate, to pay attention, to change the narrative, to all of the things that Stevenson so wisely compels us to do, and maybe there is another version of act like you own the place, because I will tell you this. I will say, sorry, this is popping up.
No, please.
Not that long ago at my work, a few years ago, I had this moment where my perception of some of my peers at work was, it was not the greatest. Like, oh yeah, Reed's not that good at doing this, or maybe we need to, pivot this responsibility over to somebody else or whatever. And it really devastated me. And I'm flying by a lot of information just for time's sake. But I remember thinking in that moment, and I feel like it was a real sort of spiritual awakening in that moment, where I feel like so much of my communication with the Lord compelled me towards this truth. It does not matter what they say you are. It matters what you are. It matters what you really and actually are. And their perception means very, very little in the scheme of things. It matters what you are. And I think in context of or in that spirit, it also matters what we do. And yes, I feel like the ones that the Lord is paying the most attention to are the ones of the lowliest station. And we too frequently desire sort of the high upper station, feel like that's the achievement or the signifier of blessing in our life, when the kingdom is so backwards that way.
Absolutely. And trying to tie these into a better bow than I was worried would happen an hour ago, in the opposing forces here of act like you own the place and own the place. Because if God is who is in front of you, that also means that someone else might be looking at you too, and that same truth is happening, and you bear the responsibility of what that means, and those implications, and how you interact with and impact and are aware of so much. I mean, step one is awareness, right? My God, like change the narrative. And what you got, Brother Lackey?
I'm just no. Just own the place. Own the place.
Right.
Like
own it. I can't get out of my brain and this is actually not meant to indict the Kim family at all, but the scene of them acting like they own the place in the night when they're running through this place, and that is us, man. Yes. Ignore the socioeconomics of those characters in the moment. That's us. We are disrespectful and irresponsible and careless and narrow-minded and myopic. These are impossible things on a certain level, but nonetheless, we push into the impossible where we can. Little things like I told my wife this the other day. Reed, I don't even know how to do this right now, but I was like, I feel like I am not honoring my convictions by some of the things I purchase at times and the implications of where those things are sourced from. You know what I mean? It's like stuff like that.
No, I understand.
That it's like, stop acting like you own the place. Own the place. Bear responsibility for how your choices and your economic choices impact others. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably, Parasite. I think that's a perfect, do you mind if we go ahead and pivot over to the fog meter? I think there's a lot that could be said, but I think it's just about time. So the fog meter, our very specific metric of fear and God, measuring its scares and its substance. So I'll start. This is a hard number for me to do, but in the fear metric for Parasite, I feel like I always want to make this distinction of, the existential sorts of fears and the nightmarish variety. We are a horror podcast, ostensibly, and so this film is not going to give anybody any nightmares, but hopefully will unsettle you to a degree that it gives you a tremendous amount to think about. I'm going to split the difference here on fear and give it a 5.
Yes, clearly we're operating on a curve for this metric on this film. I'm going to state it and then back it up. I'm going to give it an 8 because of the ways I feel like properly wrestled with what the film implicates us in as culpable in our brothers and sisters' oppression and burdening feels very, very heavy. And I mean, on a pure thriller standpoint, I think it qualifies. So, again, is it generous and on a curve? Sure, but I'm going to go with an 8.
Okay. What would you say for substance?
10.
This is the fastest vote we've ever had to do, like in terms of substance. Like this is a 10 if there ever was one.
I was even thrown, Reed. I was thrown on the second viewing how much more I was getting out of it, because you just never know. Like,
sure, of course.
I don't know. Like you,
yeah.
I watched it the first time. I'm like, I liked that a lot. I don't totally get it yet, and I still don't totally get it, but it was just fascinating watching the second viewing, being like, I am really on a wavelength that this is
of course
operating on in a really powerful way. So yeah. So that means that Bong Joon-ho's 6 Oscar-nominated Parasite receives an 8.25. That 0.25 matters.
It's
on
important.
The fog meter.
I'm 5'7.5". I'm just saying. Don't deny me. Don't deny me.
We're leaving that alone. There's just not enough time to go down that rabbit hole.
It's so true.
It's a metaphor. So I more than that, Reed, the fog meter notwithstanding, do you recommend Parasite?
Oh my gosh, watch this movie. Watch this movie, everybody. See it. Everybody
it doesn't even
see
need
it.
to be asked. Go watch it.
No,
like
watch it. Seek it out.
If you're like, I don't like foreign language films, then what? Come on.
No.
You're
and
adults.
I will say, not only that, Bong Joon-ho is you mentioned it earlier, he's a very accessible filmmaker. All of his films are easy to enter. He is a captivating and compelling storyteller in a way that few of his peers are. Parasite is a spectacular film. It deserves to be seen. You should see it. Unquestionably.
Reed, thank you.
All right.
I mean,
of course.
You have given me a soft place to land. As I mean, sincerely, you saw it.
Sure.
I imagine if you listen back to this conversation, you're like, Nathan's not okay. No, because I had no idea how to land this particular plane. But we did it. I'm proud of where we landed. What?
You know what? I think the word you're looking for is respect.
I also know, Reed, that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but it is absolutely not the end of the conversation.
No.
And speaking of fear of God, next week we will be having guest Meredith Curran join us for a discussion of Ari Aster's Midsommar. Reed, unless you have anything else to discuss, I just want to wish you and encourage our listeners to fear nothing else and be on your way rejoicing, my friend.
Amen to that. Thanks for having this conversation with me, buddy.
Yes. See you guys next week.
Bye, everybody. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And you can continue the conversation in a variety of ways. You can start by visiting thefearofgodpodcast.com for all the latest news and episodes, or for merchandise and to contact us directly. You can follow us on Twitter at The Fear of God, on Instagram at Fear of God Podcast, or join the Facebook Fear of God discussion group. Special thanks to Jacob Hunt of jacobhuntcomics.com for our artwork, to Lee Wright, who helped me, Reed Lackey, write our theme music, and to Tyler Smith at morethanonelesson.com for making our show possible. Lastly, be sure to subscribe to us on your podcast platform of choice, and if you listen to us through iTunes, we would greatly appreciate a rating and a review. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week.